Welcome to Sleepy Historian. If it is late where you are, allow your breathing to settle a battlefield. We are not going to sit in a royal court. We are not going to follow a king or a rebellion or a plague sweeping through a crowded city. Instead, we are going to remain inside a house, a small medieval house, and you may find, quietly and slowly, that this house is far more demanding than any castle. Because most medieval people did not spend their days fearing invasion. They did not wake every morning expecting catastrophe. What they feared more steadily, more realistically, was something smaller. They feared the fire going out. They feared the grain growing damp. They feared the roof shifting just enough in winter wind to let cold settle inside. The true pressure of medieval life was not drama, it was maintenance. Before we begin, allow your breathing to slow just slightly. There is nowhere to hurry, nothing to prepare. Nothing here requires effort from you. If you enjoy these slow walks through ordinary history, you can gently like the video, or subscribe, or return another evening. Sleepy Historian will be here. Now imagine it is late autumn. The air is cool and dusk comes early. You stand inside a small timber house, walls filled with wattle and daub mud pressed between woven sticks. The surface is uneven. It has cracked before. It will crack again. The floor beneath you is not wood in every case. Sometimes it is packed earth. Sometimes scattered with straw that must be replaced often. It smells faintly of smoke and something older. The house is quiet now. But earlier it was not. Earlier there were sounds of grinding grain, of water sloshing in buckets, of a door opening again and again, of someone stepping outside to check something small but important. This is what you will slowly come to understand tonight. A medieval household was not a place to rest from the world. It was the center of survival. Every beam mattered. Every sack mattered. Every ember mattered. Nothing inside this house is decorative. Everything is necessary. You do not live here casually. You live here carefully. Because the house is not separate from winter. It is not separate from hunger. It is not separate from hunger. It is not separate from time. It stands between you and them, and it requires constant attention to continue doing so. There is no weekend inside this house. There is no moment when everything is complete. Even when the fire burns steadily and the roof does not leak and the animals are quiet and the grain stores look sufficient, you are still thinking ahead. How long will the wood last? Is the salt holding? Is that faint draft new? You begin to notice something else. The responsibilities of this household are not dramatic, they are repetitive. The same motions day after day, the same inspections, the same small corrections. You wake before full light because the fire must be coaxed from embers. You sleep lightly because wind against the roof might mean something needs adjusting by morning. Even illness does not excuse you entirely. The house cannot pause. It waits, but it does not stop requiring you. And most of the time nothing remarkable happens. No catastrophe, no triumph, just small acts that prevent larger ones. That is the quiet tension of this life. The responsibility is invisible when done well. Only failure becomes visible. If the fire dies overnight, you notice. If the grain spoils, you notice. If the thatch loosens, you notice. But if everything no one writes it down. Tonight you will walk through these responsibilities slowly. We will begin with the hearth, then the walls, then the stores. We will move through food preparation, animal care, tool maintenance, clothing repair, social obligation, illness, and the quiet accounting that takes place before winter tightens its grip. There will be no sudden turns, only gradual understanding. As we move forward, you may drift. You may lose track of time. That is perfectly fine. This story does not require you to remain fully awake. In fact, medieval households often moved through long stretches of quiet labor that felt much like drifting. Your mind may wander. If it does, you can gently return to the house. Return to the dim interior, to the low ceiling darkened by smoke, to the faint orange glow of embers that must not go out. Imagine the smell of damp wool drying near the fire, The faint creak of timber cooling at night, the knowledge that morning will require the same sequence of motions again and again and again. There is a certain steadiness in that repetition, not comfort exactly, but continuity. And as we move through these responsibilities, you may begin to feel something unexpected. That survival was not loud. It was patient. It was made of small, uncelebrated corrections. The medieval household endured not because of grand events, but because someone noticed when a sack shifted, when a board loosened, when a chicken failed to return at dusk. Attention was the true defense. Tonight, nothing depends on you noticing anything. Nothing requires your correction. You can let the fire burn unattended. You can let the roof stand without inspection. You can rest. But first, let us step closer to the hearth. Let us see what it means to keep flame alive when winter presses quietly against the walls. We begin with the simplest responsibility, and perhaps the most important. The fire must never truly go out. The fire is not a comfort, it is a responsibility. When you wake in a medieval household, you do not stretch first. You do not sit and gather your thoughts. You listen. Before your eyes fully open, you listen for the smallest sound from the hearth. A faint crackle, a soft collapse of ash, the gentle shift of embers settling inward. If there is silence, true silence, you feel it immediately. Because in winter, silence from the hearth can mean cold that does not lift all day. You rise slowly from your bedding. The air is colder than your body. Your breath is visible, pale in the dim interior. The embers, if they survived the night, glow faintly beneath a gray crust of ash. You kneel. This is how the day begins. The previous evening before sleep, the fire was not extinguished. It was banked. Larger pieces of wood were allowed to burn down to coals. Ash was drawn carefully over them, thick enough to slow the burn, thin enough to preserve heat. It is a quiet calculation. Too much ash and the embers suffocate. Too little, and they burn too brightly, consuming themselves before dawn. Now in the thin light of early morning, you brush the surface gently with a small stick. You do not disturb too much at once. Beneath the ash, you search for orange. There, a faint pulse, not strong, but present. You feel a small release in your chest. The fire did not go out. You gather dry kindling, never fully dry, never perfectly stored. Small twigs, scraps of wood shaved thinner for this purpose. They must be added carefully. Too quickly, and the embers cool. Too slowly, and the air fails to reach them. You blow gently, not hard, not urgently, just enough breath to encourage. A thin thread of smoke rises first. It smells sharp and bitter. The room fills with it quickly because medieval chimneys, when they exist at all, are rarely efficient. In many houses, smoke simply rises toward a hole in the roof, drifting through rafters before escaping. Your eyes water. This is normal. The smoke darkens the beams over years. It preserves them in a way. It also settles into cloth, into hair, into everything. Gradually a small flame appears. It trembles. It bends with the draft that slips under the door. You watch it longer than you might expect, because this flame will determine the rhythm of the next several hours. Without it, there is no warm pottage, no heated water, no softened bread, no comfort against the morning air. And relighting from a neighbor's house while possible carries a quiet embarrassment. It means you failed to guard what should have been guarded. The fire must be managed every day. Ash builds up quickly. If not cleared, it chokes airflow. But ash is not waste. It is saved. It can be scattered, used in lye making, or spread in certain places to deter pests. Even cleaning the hearth is not simple removal. It is redistribution. Wood must be gathered constantly. Not once a week, not when convenient. Wood is consumed steadily, invisibly. A large stack shrinks in ways you barely notice until you suddenly do. In autumn you measure the pile with your eyes. In winter you measure it with your hands. How many logs remain? How many weeks of cold? The fire also shapes the house itself. Food is cooked here. Tools are warmed here before minor repairs. Wet wool is hung near the flame, though never too close. Children sit by it. Elders rest near it. Sometimes animals edge close as well. The hearth is not separate from living space. It is the center of it. And yet it is dangerous. Sparks leap unexpectedly. Thatch roofs when dry are not forgiving. One misjudged log, one rolling ember, can undo years of labor in a single night. So you watch, not constantly, but regularly. Your awareness returns to it throughout the day. When wind shifts, you check it. When wood cracks loudly, you glance up. When smoke thickens unexpectedly, you adjust something small. You become familiar with the moods of flame. There is a certain sound when wood is too damp, a sullen hiss, a refusal to burn cleanly. It produces more smoke, less heat. There is another sound when wood is too dry. It snaps sharply, releasing sparks. You learn these tones as naturally as breathing. At night the ritual repeats. Before sleep you consider the state of the embers again. Have they burned down evenly? Is the ash sufficient to slow them? You rearrange pieces with an iron poker, if you are fortunate enough to own one. Otherwise with a stick, cautious and patient. You cover the coals once more. You do not say anything aloud, but you hope, because winter nights are long, and waking to cold that has already settled deep into the house means a slower recovery. It means shivering hands while trying to coax life from something that has nearly vanished. And sometimes, despite care, despite attention, the embers fail. Morning arrives gray and absolute. You kneel, brush aside ash, and find nothing, only dull powder. On those mornings you move differently. You wrap yourself more tightly. You step outside into air that bites more sharply, seeking a neighbor whose fire survived. The walk is short, but the silence feels longer. When you return with the borrowed coal cradled carefully, you feel both relief and quiet resolve. Tonight you will bank it better. The fire never truly goes out, not because it cannot, but because someone refuses to let it. And that refusal is daily. It is ordinary, it is unseen. The medieval household does not survive on grand defenses. It survives because each morning someone kneels in ash and searches for a faint orange glow. You may notice now how small this responsibility sounds, how repetitive, and yet everything else depends on it. Without flame, nothing softens, nothing dries, nothing warms. The house becomes simply shelter against wind, not protection against cold. So you rise before full light, you kneel, you breathe gently onto hidden coals, and you wait for the small flame that proves the house still holds. Tomorrow you will do it again. And the day after that, and the day after that, and the after that. There is no finish, only continuation. The house does not protect you automatically. It must be persuaded. When you stand inside a medieval household and look at the walls, you do not see permanence. You see effort held in place. The structure is usually timber framed, its wooden beams fitted together with care that once required many hands. Between those beams is wattle and daub-thin sticks woven tightly, then covered with a mixture of mud, straw, and sometimes animal hair. It looks solid, but it is not immune. Over time, the daub dries and cracks. Small lines appear first, barely visible. Then the wind finds them. Moisture follows. Frost widens them quietly. You notice these changes slowly. Perhaps one morning, while light angles through the doorway, you see a thin sliver of brightness where none existed before. You step closer. You press your thumb gently against the wall. It crumbles slightly. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, just enough to remind you that walls do not hold themselves together. Repair is not rare, it is seasonal. In warmer months, you mix fresh daub mud carried in buckets, straw chopped finely, water added carefully. You press it into the gaps with your hands. The texture is cool and damp. It leaves residue beneath your nails. It dries unevenly. It must be checked again. This is how the house survives through repeated correction. The roof carries a different kind of pressure. Thatch made from straw or reeds, layered thickly and angled steeply, sheds rain well when new. But no thatch remains new for long. Wind lifts edges, birds tug at strands, moisture seeps inward where layers thin. You cannot always see damage from inside. Instead, you notice symptoms: a faint drip during steady rain, a darkening patch along the interior beam, a smell that lingers longer than it should. You step outside and look upward. From below, the roof appears intact. But you know how easily small shifts become larger ones. Climbing is not done casually. You do not ascend the roof daily. But you inspect it often with your eyes. You track changes. You memorize shapes and textures. When repair is needed, it is patient work. Bundles of fresh thatch are tied carefully. Loose sections are secured. Hands move slowly, deliberately. A misplaced knot can unravel in wind. There is no perfection here, only adequacy. The door presents its own quiet struggle. It is wooden, heavy enough to block wind, but rarely sealed completely. Gaps form beneath it. In winter, drafts slide along the floor like invisible rivers. You place cloth along the threshold. Straw, whatever reduces the flow. Still, cold finds entry. The floor absorbs much of it. Packed earth floors are practical. They are steady and easy to maintain, but they retain dampness. In prolonged rain, moisture rises subtly through them. You scatter fresh straw. You replace it often. Old straw carries scent and decay. New straw brightens the room briefly, a pale gold against dark walls. This cycle continues endlessly. Replace, compress, replace. The house breathes with the weather. In summer, heat lingers under the thatch, trapped and heavy. In winter, warmth escapes faster than you wish. You cannot insulate fully. You adapt instead. Sleeping arrangements shift with season. Bedding is drawn closer to the hearth in colder months. During warmer periods, distance increases. You adjust your body to compensate for what the house cannot do. Rain becomes something you listen to carefully. A soft rain is reassuring. It means crops drink, wells fill, and thatch sheds water properly. A persistent rain creates tension. You count the hours it falls. You watch corners. You move stored goods away from walls just in case. Storms are not dramatic most of the time. They are not lightning-splitting beams or roofs torn away in an instant. They are steady pressure. Wind pushing for hours. Rain tapping relentlessly. Cold settling slowly into joints and cloth. The house resists, but it does not dominate. It negotiates. Every medieval household exists in negotiation with weather. There is no full victory, only survival through seasons. Winter is the true measure. Cold does not arrive as a single event. It deepens gradually. Each night lingers longer. Frost traces patterns along exterior beams. You feel it inside first in your hands. Tasks require more effort when fingers stiffen. You look at the walls differently in winter. You notice every imperfection. You place your palm against the interior surface and feel the chill radiating through. You consider whether more daub is needed, but daub cannot be applied effectively in deep cold. So you wait. You endure. You adjust again. More straw on the floor, thicker layering of clothing, longer hours near the fire. The house is never finished. It is always in the process of becoming sufficient. When spring returns, you inspect everything, not because you expect collapse, but because you know how close it always is to insufficiency. You circle the house slowly. You run your hands along beams. You press gently at corners. You study the roofline from different angles. These inspections are quiet rituals. They are not urgent, but they are constant. The medieval household stands because someone notices early, because someone patches small cracks before they widen, because someone tightens bindings before wind finds them, and you begin to understand that this attention is not exceptional. It is ordinary. Every season requires it. Every household performs it, not once, but again and again. The walls do not defend you alone. The roof does not shelter you alone. They rely on your continued involvement. Without you, the house returns slowly to earth, and so you move along its edges. You repair. You adjust. You wait for weather to test your work, and when it does, you listen carefully, not for catastrophe, but for the subtle sound of something shifting. Because survival, here, is rarely loud. It is measured in cracks prevented, in drips stopped, in wind redirected. Tomorrow, you will check again, not because you doubt, but because you understand. The house stands between you and the open air, and it stands only as long as someone keeps persuading it to do so. A medieval household does not measure wealth in coins. It measures it in what remains, in sacks that stay full, in barrels that do not sour, in roots that do not soften too soon. When you step away from the hearth and the walls and look toward the corner where stores are kept, you are not looking at excess. You are looking at time made visible. Grain is the most important of these stores. It arrives in heavy sacks after harvest, carried in, stacked carefully away from damp walls. The sacks are coarse and woven tightly, but they are not impervious. Moisture can creep upward from the floor. Insects can work their way inside. Mice can gnaw patiently at the seams, so you do not simply stack grain and forget it. You inspect it, often. When you pass by, you glance at the base of the sacks. Is there loose grain scattered below? A small trail might suggest something feeding where it should not. You run your hand along the side. Does it feel dry? Does it give too easily beneath your palm? You lift one slightly, feeling its weight. You memorize the weight, because as weeks pass, that weight changes. It grows lighter, sometimes gradually as expected, sometimes more quickly than it should. Grain is not eaten directly most of the time. It must be ground. That means its survival and storage determines whether there will be bread weeks from now. Nearby, perhaps in a shallow pit lined with straw or wood, root vegetables are stored. Turnips, onions, carrots. They are not glamorous foods, but they endure. The pit is cool and dark. It smells of earth. When you open it, you release a damp breath from below. You crouch and sort through the layers carefully. You remove any root that has softened. One spoiled root can spread decay to others. You do not wait for rock to become visible. You check before you are certain. Salted meat hangs from beams or rests in barrels packed with coarse salt. Salt is precious. It preserves, but only when applied generously and consistently. You examine the surface of the meat. Does it glisten too much? Is there any scent that feels wrong, even faintly? Your nose becomes part of your inventory. You trust it. You also trust routine. Every few days you look again. Nothing dramatic changes from one inspection to the next. But time is not idle. It moves quietly through food. Damp creeps upward in autumn. Cold hardens everything in winter. In warmer months, spoilage quickens. The household must stay ahead of these shifts. You keep dried herbs bundled and hung high, away from dampness. Apples might be laid out on racks, turned occasionally to prevent soft spots from forming on one side. Everything is positioned deliberately, not for beauty, for longevity. The floor beneath stores matters too. If it is earth, it must be dry. If it feels damp beneath your bare hand, you scatter ash to absorb moisture. You lift sacks slightly on wooden planks if you have them. Small adjustments prevent larger loss. Mice are constant visitors. You hear them sometimes at night, soft, rustling, quick movements along walls. You set simple traps. You seal small holes with packed mud. But you never assume complete victory. Instead, you calculate loss as part of survival. A handful of grain gone, a small bite taken. You compensate where you can. Barrels require their own attention. Water barrels must remain clean. Stagnant water turns quickly. You rinse them when possible, scraping the interior with cloth or rough fiber. Halay, if brewed, must be watched closely. Fermentation can sour unexpectedly. You taste carefully before serving. Nothing in storage is static. It is all in negotiation with time. You may notice that these inspections do not bring excitement. They are repetitive. You move from sack to pit to barrel and back again. You adjust. You note small differences. You think ahead. How many weeks until spring? How long before fresh growth returns? Winter makes these questions sharper. In deep cold, food keeps longer, but access becomes harder. Frozen ground resists digging. Snow blocks paths to outbuildings where some stores might be kept. So before heavy frost, you rearrange. You bring certain items closer to the interior. You reduce the number of steps required to reach what is essential. The medieval household survives by reducing risk in advance, not by reacting quickly later. You begin to see a pattern forming across all these responsibilities. The fire must be maintained before it fails. The walls must be repaired before they widen. The food must be checked before it spoils. There is no dramatic turning point in these tasks, only gradual shifts. The sacks grow lighter. The roots diminish in number. The hanging meat thins. You feel this not as panic, but as awareness. Awareness shapes behavior. Portions become slightly smaller without announcement. Meals stretch subtly. You do not speak of scarcity loudly. You simply adapt. And sometimes, despite attention, something spoils unexpectedly. A sack dampened from below. A barrel that leaks. You do not rage. You absorb the loss. Because storage is never perfect. It is managed. You kneel beside your grain once more before sleep, pressing your palm against the coarse fabric. You estimate silently. You calculate days in your mind, not in exact numbers but in feeling. Will this carry us through? Most years it does, because you have been attentive, because you have looked and touched and smelled and adjusted. The medieval household is a place where survival is stored in corners, where time is stacked in sacks, where vigilance is quiet and daily. Tomorrow you will check again, not because you distrust your previous inspection, but because food does not pause, and neither can you. The house stands because what is inside it is protected not only from weather, but from neglect, and neglect is the only thing truly unaffordable. Eating is never the beginning of a meal. It is the end of many small efforts. When you feel hunger in a medieval household, you do not move directly toward relief. You move toward work. The fire must already be awake. If it is not, you kneel again and coax it. Water must be drawn, even if the bucket feels heavy before the day has properly begun. You step outside into air that is sharper than the interior, even in mild seasons. The well or stream waits at a distance that is never far enough to ignore. You carry the bucket carefully, mindful of balance. Spilling water means walking again. The rope of the well is rough in your hands. It creaks as it lowers and rises. The water at the bottom is dark, reflecting nothing. When the bucket surfaces, droplets fall back with soft sounds. You carry it home slowly. Water is not simply for drinking. It is for cooking, for cleaning utensils, sometimes for mixing with ground grain to form dough or pottage. Inside again you set the bucket near the hearth. Grain does not grind itself. If flour has already been prepared, it is precious and used carefully. But often you grind grain as needed, using a hand core in a simple stone mill. You sit or kneel beside it. One stone rests atop another. The upper stone has a handle. You turn it steadily, pouring small amounts of grain into the center opening. The motion is repetitive, circular, slow. You feel resistance through your arms and shoulders. The sound is steady, a rough grinding that becomes familiar. It takes time. A handful of flour emerges gradually along the edges. You gather it carefully, mindful not to lose what you have just created. This is not efficient by modern standards. It is deliberate. The flour is coarse. It will never be perfectly fine. But it will thicken water. It will become bread or porridge. Hunger waits while you turn the stone. Wood must be adjusted beneath the pot. If the fire burns too strongly, food will scorch. Too weakly, it will remain thin and uncooked. You hang an iron pot over the flame, if you own one. Otherwise, you place a clay vessel carefully among the embers. You pour water first, then flour. You stir with a wooden spoon. It thickens slowly. The smell is simple and familiar. Sometimes onions or herbs are added, if available. Occasionally small scraps of meat, if stores allow. But many meals are modest. Then pottage, bread hardened by yesterday's air, softens slightly over heat. You do not rush the cooking. You cannot. The fire dictates pace. It shifts. It settles. You adjust logs gently, watching flame color and listening for the sound of simmering. There is no clock. You judge by texture, by scent, by instinct built from repetition. Children, if present, may hover nearby. But they know that eating comes after preparation. There is no expectation of immediacy. The rhythm of hunger and labor is accepted. Sometimes you bake bread in a communal oven if one exists nearby. That requires planning. Dough must rise, though rising depends on warmth. In colder months, it rises slowly. You wait. Waiting becomes part of the meal. In lean seasons, flour is stretched. Ground peas or beans may be mixed in. Bread becomes denser, heavier. It fills the stomach, but not always fully. You notice how much remains in the flour container. You calculate silently. Will this last until the next market? Until harvest? Preparation continues even after the pot is lifted. Utensils must be wiped clean. Water used to rinse them cannot be wasted. Sometimes it is poured outside, sometimes used for animals. Nothing leaves the household without consideration. You eat slowly, not ceremoniously, but without haste. Food represents hours of small tasks: wood gathered, water drawn, grain ground, fire tended. You chew and feel the warmth spread. It is not indulgent, it is sustaining. And as soon as the meal ends, preparation for the next one is already begun. The fire must remain stable. Water levels must be checked. Grain must be assessed again. There is no full break between meals, only a pause before repetition resumes. On certain days, more elaborate preparation is required. If meat is to be cooked, it must be cut carefully, bones saved for broth. If vegetables are to be preserved, they must be sliced and hung or salted. Even special days carry labor, perhaps especially special days. You begin to understand that hunger in a medieval household is not a sudden emergency. It is a steady presence. It does not shout. It reminds, and preparation answers it, step by step. Turn the stone, draw the water, stir the pot, wait, adjust, serve, eat, clean, repeat, adjust, serve, eat, clean, repeat. There is a quiet dignity in this repetition. Food does not appear by accident. It arrives through persistence, and the household survives because someone wakes each day prepared to begin that cycle again. You feel the weight of it not as burden exactly, but as constancy. Eating is relief, yes, but it is also evidence that the work continues. Tomorrow hunger will return, and so will the stone, and the rope, and the pot, and your hands. Hunger in a medieval household is rarely sharp. It does not usually arrive as sudden emptiness or dramatic weakness. It lingers. It hums quietly beneath the day. After a meal, you feel steadier for a time. Warmth spreads through your body. The edge softens, but it does not disappear entirely. There is always an awareness of what remains and what does not. Portions are measured without scales. You know by sight and habit how much flour to stir into the pot. You know how many slices of bread can be cut before tomorrow feels uncertain. Children eat first if there are children, not ceremoniously but instinctively. Adults watch the pot, calculate silently, adjust their own share by a fraction. A fraction becomes routine. You do not announce it. You simply serve slightly less to yourself. No one comments. This is how households endure lean months. The year does not provide evenly. After harvest, stores feel abundant. Sacks are full, roots are firm. Salted meat hangs heavy. By late winter, the sacks sag differently. The root pit holds more space between vegetables. Meat, if any remains, is thinner. This gradual change shapes behavior long before true scarcity arrives. You begin stretching meals subtly. Water increases, grain decreases, Herbs add flavor where substance is thin. A thicker stew one week becomes a thinner one the next. You notice it in texture, in the way the spoon moves through liquid. Hunger becomes part of your posture, not weakness exactly, but a slight inward awareness. You bend to tasks with the knowledge that your energy is limited and must be directed carefully. In fields, if you work them, hunger feels heavier by midday. The body requests more than the stores easily provide. You return home at dusk not expecting fullness, but sufficiency. Sufficiency is the goal. There are days when bread feels harder, not because it has changed dramatically, but because you are more aware of its density. You chew slowly. You swallow deliberately. You do not waste crumbs. Crumbs are gathered, sometimes added to the next pot, sometimes saved for animals. Nothing is discarded thoughtlessly. Lean seasons are not identical each year. Some winters are longer, some harvests weaker. But even in relatively good years, hunger never fully retreats. It is not dramatic enough to frighten daily. It is steady enough to shape habit. You become skilled at ignoring it, just enough to continue. At night, when tasks slow and the fire settles, hunger is quieter. Warmth and stillness reduce its presence. But in early morning, before food preparation begins again, it returns more distinctly. You wake aware of it, not as pain, as expectation. The household responds. The cornerstone turns again. The water bucket is lowered again. The pot simmers again. There are times when neighbors share quietly. A ladle passed across a threshold. A small loaf exchanged for future assistance. Community cushions hunger, but does not erase it. Every household faces similar calculations, and there are harsher years. Years when rain falls too long or frost comes too early. In those years, portions shrink more noticeably. You speak less about food. You focus on tasks. Some in the village grow weaker. They do not always complain. They simply move more slowly. Morning does not come for everyone in the hardest seasons. But even then, the household continues its rituals. The fire must be tended. The grain must be measured. The water drawn. You might think hunger would dominate every thought. It does not. It weaves into the background of living. It sharpens attention. It reminds you that stores are finite, that time matters. You notice how carefully salt is sprinkled, how deliberately meat is sliced when it appears. You notice how soup is stirred to distribute ingredients evenly. Fairness becomes survival. No one says the word fairness. They practice it. When spring approaches, hope shifts the tone of hunger. The earth will soften. Green shoots will appear. Fresh leaves can be gathered. But until then, the thinness persists. And yet, life continues. Tasks are completed. Tools repaired. Animals tended. Children grow, even if slowly. The medieval household is not defined by feast. It is defined by endurance. You learn to measure hunger not in hours, but in seasons. Not in panic, but in patience. Tonight, if you consider your own day, you may realize how rarely hunger interrupts you. Food arrives quickly. Preparation is brief. Choice is abundant. In the medieval house, hunger was companion, not crisis. It shaped posture. It guided portion. It whispered at the edge of thought. And still each morning you rose. You turned the stone. You stirred the pot. You shared what was there. Not because it was enough to be comfortable, but because it was enough to continue. Hunger never fully leaves, but neither does effort. And in that steady exchange, the household survives one more day, and then another, and then another. You do not preserve food because you expect disaster. You preserve it because you expect time. Time stretches longer than freshness. Time outlasts harvest. Time does not pause simply because you have gathered enough for today. In a medieval household, preservation is not a special activity. It is woven into ordinary days. It begins in late summer, when abundance feels most secure. That is precisely when you must begin thinking about absence. You stand over a wooden table with vegetables spread before you. Cabbage leaves layered thick and pale, beans still firm from the vine, apples that bruise if handled carelessly. The air is warmer now. That warmth speeds decay, so you work steadily. Cabbage is shredded with deliberate strokes of a knife. Salt is scattered across the cut leaves. You press them into a barrel or crock, layer upon layer, compacting firmly. The salt draws moisture outward. Liquid gathers slowly. You place a weight on top, perhaps a stone wrapped in cloth to keep everything submerged. You check it daily at first. Fermentation is not visible in dramatic ways. It reveals itself in scent. Sharp, but not foul. You lean close and breathe carefully. Your nose learns to distinguish between preservation and spoilage. It is a subtle education. Meat requires a different approach. If an animal is slaughtered, nothing can be wasted. Cuts are separated quickly. Some are cooked immediately. Others are salted heavily, packed into barrels, or hung above smoke. Smoke curls upward from slow-burning wood beneath strips of flesh. It dries gradually. You adjust their distance from flame to prevent cooking. Too much heat ruins the effort. Too little, and moisture lingers. You return repeatedly to check, not because you expect failure, but because small shifts matter. Drying herbs is simpler but no less attentive. Bundles are tied and hung high in the rafters where smoke drifts lightly. You space them carefully so air can move between leaves. If they crowd too closely, mold forms. You check for discoloration. You remove damaged stems before they spread. Fruit is laid out on racks or strung along cords. You turn pieces occasionally to ensure even drying. Your hands move methodically. You do not rush. Preservation requires patience. The household changes rhythm slightly during these weeks. There is more slicing, more salting, more arranging, more watching. You may feel a faint sense of accomplishment as jars and barrels fill, but it is restrained, because you know how easily stores diminish over months. You do not celebrate what must last until spring. You protect it. Barrels are sealed tightly, lids weighted, edges inspected. You note which containers hold what. Memory becomes your inventory system. You do not label with ink. You remember placement. Left corner for cabbage, back wall for salted pork, small crock near hearth for daily use. When autumn air cools, you feel relief. Lower temperatures assist your work, but you do not relax. Cool air can still hide dampness. You inspect cellar walls for moisture. You run your fingers along barrel edges to ensure seals remain intact. Occasionally, something fails. A crock cracks. A lid loosens. You discover mold creeping along the surface. You remove what you can salvage. You discard what you must. Loss is accepted quietly. Preservation reduces risk. It does not eliminate it. And beneath all this effort lies an unspoken understanding. You are preparing for a time when fresh growth ceases, when fields rest under frost, when animals produce less milk, when daylight shortens. The preserved food becomes bridge and promise. It connects seasons. It allows continuity. In winter, when wind presses hard against walls and snow covers paths, you descend into the root cellar or reach for a barrel and feel the result of autumn labor. The lid lifts. The scent escapes. You take only what is needed. You reseal carefully. You measure consumption against remaining supply. Preservation also shapes daily routine long after the initial effort. Salted meat must be soaked before cooking to soften its intensity. Fermented cabbage is rationed in small scoops. Dried beans are soaked overnight. Every meal becomes conversation between past effort and present need. You taste summer and winter, but you taste it cautiously, because once consumed it does not return. You may notice that preservation requires imagining a future you cannot see. You do not know how harsh winter will be. You do not know whether illness will slow work. You prepare anyway. That preparation becomes quiet reassurance. Even if hunger lingers, you know you have extended the season's generosity as far as possible. And so the household moves through cycles: harvest, preserve, inspect, consume, inspect again. The repetition never fully ends. In early spring, when stores grow thin and daylight lengthens slowly, You count the remaining barrels more often. You calculate more carefully. You open lids more slowly. But if preservation was done well, if vigilance held steady, you reach the first fresh greens with something still remaining. That is success, not abundance. Continuation. The medieval household survives because someone worked months ahead of need, because someone sliced cabbage in late summer heat, because someone tended smoke for hours, because someone returned daily to inspect the smallest changes. Preserving for the unknown is not dramatic. It is quiet trust in routine. It is effort made in advance. And when winter settles deep and the world narrows to hearth and wall and roof, you understand fully what those warm autumn days were for. You open a barrel. You serve a small portion. You close it again. And the house continues, sustained by foresight that once felt repetitive, even tedious. Tomorrow, you will inspect again. Not because you fear sudden loss, but because time never stops moving through what you have stored, and you must move with it. Animals do not live separately from you, not entirely. In a medieval household, the boundary between human shelter and animal shelter is thin, sometimes only a wall of timber or a low partition of woven sticks. You hear them before you see them each morning, a shifting weight, a low breath, the faint scrape of hoof against packed earth. If you keep a cow, she is likely housed close perhaps in an attached byre that shares warmth through a common wall. In colder seasons, that shared warmth matters. The heat of her body seeps through wood and mud, softening the interior chill. You wake and listen. Is she restless? Is there silence where there should be movement? You rise not only for the fire, but for her. The door to the byre opens with a wooden groan. The air inside smells heavier sweet hay, damp straw, animal warmth. Steam rises faintly from her back in colder months. You approach slowly. You check her eyes. You check her stance. Illness in an animal is quiet at first. A slight reluctance to move. A lowered head. You notice these things because you must. Milk, if she gives it, is not guaranteed. You sit on a low stool and press your forehead briefly against her flank. It is warm, steady. You begin milking with practiced rhythm. The sound is soft liquid striking the wooden pail in a steady pattern. You do not rush. You cannot. If startled, she shifts. If impatient, she kicks. You move calmly, reassuring with touch and voice. The milk is warm when it fills the pail. You carry it carefully back inside. It will be consumed quickly, or turned into something that lasts slightly longer, cheese perhaps, if skill and time allow. Chickens require less space but equal attention. They scatter during the day, pecking at ground, scratching for insects. At dusk, you count them. 1, 2, 3. If one fails to return, you notice immediately. You search nearby hedges. You look for feathers. Loss is accepted, but never ignored. Eggs are gathered gently. They are small, not uniform in shape. You turn them in your hands, checking for cracks. Even small fractures invite spoilage. A pig, if you are fortunate enough to keep one, consumes scraps and grows steadily over months. It is both companion and future food. You feed it deliberately. You monitor its health. You are aware, quietly, that its life intersects with your own survival. Animals provide more than food. They shape routine. They demand movement, even when your body is tired. In winter, when wind presses against the house and snow settles deeply, you step outside anyway. Hay must be carried. Water troughs must be checked. Ice must be broken. Your fingers stiffen quickly in cold. You exhale and watch breath mingle with animal steam. The cow shifts her way patiently. The pig snorts softly. You are not alone in your labor, but you are responsible. Manure accumulates steadily. It must be removed, not only for cleanliness, but for health. You shovel straw and waste into a pile outside, where it will eventually return to fields as nourishment. Nothing is isolated. Animals feed on field remnants. Fields feed animals. Animals feed you. You feed the fields again. This cycle does not stop. At night the sounds continue faintly. a soft movement, a low murmur. You grow accustomed to these sounds as reassurance. Silence where noise should be unsettles you more than disturbance. If an animal falls ill, the household shifts around it. You mix simple remedies from herbs if you know them. You adjust feed. You watch closely. There are no veterinarians to summon, only observation. Sometimes animals recover, sometimes they do not. If loss comes, it is quiet. You stand beside the empty space and calculate the impact. Less milk, fewer eggs, less warmth. You adjust again. Animals also offer something less measurable: presence. The shared rhythm of breath in cold mornings, the sound of chewing hay, the steady pulse of life beyond your own. In a small medieval household, isolation is rare. Even in silence, something nearby shifts or sighs. You may think of animals as property, but here they are extension of the household body. Their survival entwines with yours. Their comfort, within reason, supports your own. You do not anthropomorphize them. You do not romanticize them. You tend them. You rely on them. They rely on you. Each morning repeats the same sequence. Listen, open the door, check eyes, check posture, milk, feed, remove waste, close the door, return to the fire. You may feel the repetition settle deeper now. The same movements layered across days, the same sounds, the same calculations. The medieval household does not wake into silence. It wakes into shared responsibility. And when you finally sit near the hearth after tending animals, hands still smelling faintly of hay and earth, you feel the weight of continuity. Tomorrow before full light you will step outside again, even if wind is stronger, even if hunger lingers, even if your body aches slightly more than yesterday, because animals do not wait for convenience, and the household cannot afford neglect. And this shared warmth and shared labor, the day begins once more. Every object in a medieval household carries its own weight, not just physically, but in responsibility. Tools are not simply instruments. They are extensions of your hands and the household's survival. A wooden shovel, worn smooth from repeated shoveling of straw and soil, requires inspection before each day's work. A split handle can send a shard into your palm. A rough edge dulls your rhythm. You do not discard tools lightly. You repair them carefully. A wedge of wood can hold a handle. Leather bindings are adjusted with quiet patience. Metal blades, if they exist, are sharpened against a stone. The motion is slow, circular, deliberate. You feel the resistance in your arm. You listen to the faint grind. You notice the sound changes if the edge is properly aligned. Rope and cordage are checked similarly. Buckets, barrels, pails each has weak points. Iron bands can loosen. Wooden staves swell in moisture. You run your fingers along seams. You lift lightly to test integrity. Nothing is taken for granted. Every morning before you begin larger tasks, you survey the household for wear. The cornerstone is inspected for chips. Pots are checked for cracks. Cloth and garments are examined for holes. Shoes, if you have them, are inspected for splits in the sole. Even small tears left unattended will grow. The household survives not because tools are abundant, but because they are maintained. You repair patiently. Leather patches sewn with coarse thread, wood smoothed with a simple knife, metal hammered, reheated if possible, reshaped. These are repetitive movements. They are slow. They require attention and care. Fatigue builds quietly. Each day muscles ache a little more from bending, kneeling, and lifting. Back muscles stiffen from carrying pails of water, bundles of straw, or heavy sacks of grain. Hands are calloused, palms thicken from rope, wood, and stone. You notice these changes gradually. They are not dramatic, but they accumulate. You move differently because of them. The motions that once required conscious thought now happen automatically, but fatigue lingers in subtle ways. Even the simplest repairs have consequences if neglected. A weak handle can make lifting awkward. A dull knife slows preparation. A cracked pot leaks precious liquid. Small failures ripple outward. They affect fire management, Food preparation, animal care. Attention to tools is attention to survival itself. The household is a network of small responsibilities. The hearth requires coals. Coals require wood. Wood requires cutting and stacking. Sacks of grain require inspection. Grain requires grinding. Flour requires cooking. Tools are necessary to accomplish all of this. Their wear, if ignored, is invisible until it interrupts the routine. You notice that time becomes layered. Each day repeats familiar actions, but subtle differences accumulate. Weather changes. Cold seeps more quickly through worn doors. Winter frost shifts floor moisture beneath packed earth. The straw softens in some places, dampening heat. Tools respond differently. You adjust. You compensate. You plan ahead. There is a quiet endurance in these actions. The body must adapt. The mind must remain alert without panicking. The medieval household is a slow-moving balance, maintained through repeated, measured acts. Small shifts in tool condition, in material integrity, in personal fatigue are tracked continuously, almost unconsciously. By midday you may pause, resting near the hearth. You feel the ache in your shoulders, the subtle tightness in your hands. The smell of smoke mingles with damp wood and straw. Animals stir nearby. A cow shifts. A chicken clucks. You exhale slowly. You are aware of time passing, not in hours, but in tasks completed and remaining. Even leisure is slow and measured. When work is finished, your hands may still find something to smooth, adjust, or inspect. A small stone in the hearth, a loose strap on a barrel, a bend in a broom handle. Repetition becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes reassurance. Yet repetition does not dull awareness. It sharpens it subtly. You notice minute changes in weight, sound, texture. The sound of rope on the wall differs when stretched. The cornstone responds differently after a week of grinding. Pots leak more slowly as cracks develop. Your hands sense these differences without conscious thought. You anticipate, you adapt, you prevent. This is the quiet survival of the medieval household, not sudden crisis, not dramatic heroics, not rush, only the accumulation of small, deliberate acts. At the end of the day, when tasks are paused and firelight flickers across walls, you review silently. Tools laid out, animals fed, fire stable, grain inspected, water replenished, the house stands intact. You feel a subtle satisfaction, not joy, not relief, but assurance. Continuity has been maintained. The household is ready for another day. Tomorrow, these tasks resume, and the day after, and the day after that. Fatigue and attention coexist. Labor is steady yet never absent of awareness. You notice small inefficiencies without distress. You accept the slow accumulation of strain. The body responds, adapts, endures. Survival is repetition. Repetition is survival. And so the household endures. Through cold, through hunger, through slow degradation of tools and material, the rhythm continues. Every repaired handle, every sharpened blade, every properly stacked sack of grain contributes to the quiet persistence of life within walls that are never perfect, but are sufficient. Tomorrow you will rise, inspect, repair, and prepare again. Each small action prevents larger failure. Each day is a promise extended, not for comfort, but for continuity. Light in a medieval household is never abundant. It is precious, fragile, and carefully managed. You do not flip a switch to brighten a room. You do not summon warmth with a button or thermostat. Instead, you move slowly through shadows, aware of every flicker, every wisp of smoke, every subtle shift in temperature. Candles are rare. Tallow candles, their surfaces uneven, burn dimly and unpredictably. You trim the wick carefully before lighting. A flame flickers briefly and steadies. Its glow reaches only part of the room, casting long, soft shadows against the walls. You plan your work around this limited illumination. Grinding grain, cutting vegetables, repairing tools. Each action is timed and positioned to take advantage of available light. The fire is more than illumination. It is warmth. It is life. but it demands constant attention. Logs must be added gradually, coals must be stirred, sparks escape, settle into straw, and you watch carefully, moving slowly to prevent the smallest hazard from becoming a problem. Heat behaves differently within the house. It rises toward the rafters and retreats toward corners when logs burn low. You adjust clothing accordingly, layers added in winter, removed in warmer months. Children, if present, are moved closer or farther from the hearth. Animals are shifted slightly if possible, so that their bodies share warmth without crowding. Time itself seems measured by these rhythms. Morning arrives with faint light and colder air. You carry water, tend animals, coax fire into flame. Midday brings activity tempered by hunger and fatigue. Evening approaches with shadows stretching, firelight flickering, chores finishing gradually, but never completely. Night arrives slowly, weighted by the effort and attention that cannot pause entirely. Every day is a series of adjustments, logs added, coal stirred, water drawn, food prepared. Even moments of rest are framed by the knowledge that light diminishes, fire cools, animals shift, and water must not stagnate. You pause only briefly. Every small act reinforces continuity. Observation becomes part of daily life. You notice how smoke curls differently with humidity. You notice drafts creeping under doors and through cracks in wattle and daub. You feel the chill in corners, adjusting straw on the floor or blankets near beds. You calculate sleep positions to retain warmth without exhausting space or risking suffocation by too many coverings. Meals follow these rhythms. The timing of food preparation and consumption aligns with available light and warmth. You measure not just portions, but labor, how long it will take to grind grain, to heat water, to stir pottage, to coax children into eating. Every task blends with another, forming a quiet choreography dictated by survival rather than convenience. Even minor failures echo through the household. A log too small burns out quickly. Water drawn too late leaves you carrying heavy buckets by failing light. Tools dull or crack, slowing work. You respond calmly, adjusting, repairing, and moving forward. Panic rarely enters. Instead, awareness deepens. You learn the subtle cues that indicate success or warning. Each sensation, heat, smell, sound guides action without haste. Fatigue is constant, but managed. You rise early, carry out tasks steadily. Pause briefly at the hearth, and repeat. You feel it in shoulders and back, hands and fingers. You notice tension quietly, adjusting grip or posture. Muscles remember repetition. You move efficiently without thinking, yet remain alert to shifts in weight, texture, or resistance. Endurance is built slowly, day by day. Night requires its own care. Fire burns down. Coals glow faintly. You adjust them to maintain minimal heat for sleep. Animals are secured. Food is set aside. Tools are placed within reach or stacked carefully. You move slowly through shadows, aware of every creak in beams, every shift in straw, every faint noise of wind against thatch. Silence is never complete. The household breathes, moves, listens. Sleep comes in intervals. You rise when heat wanes too much. You adjust a blanket, a bundle of straw, or a hearth log. You rise when an animal calls softly. You rise when hunger pricks the edges of consciousness. Every awakening is quiet, deliberate. You notice subtle changes in the room's warmth, in the weight of the air, in the moisture of the floor. You adjust again and again. The daily rhythm of light, heat, and labor merges with the household's other cycles: animal care, food preparation, tool maintenance, and preservation. Everything interlocks. One delay, one misstep, can ripple through the day, but you adapt continuously, calmly, with attention to detail. The medieval household survives through this careful choreography. By morning, when weak light returns, you are aware of time's passage differently. You understand the slow accumulation of hours, the blending of activity and rest, the quiet persistence of effort. You notice that your body, though weary, moves with certainty. Your hands remember the tasks of yesterday. Your eyes anticipate the fire's warmth. Your mind calculates preparation for the day ahead. Continuity is the household's measure of success, not abundance, not comfort, not safety in the modern sense, only survival through attention, rhythm, and patience. Each day folds into the next, repeating, enduring, sustaining. The medieval household's life is measured not in moments of excitement or drama, but in the careful maintenance of light, heat, and rhythm. Tomorrow you will rise again. Logs will be added, water drawn, grain ground, animals fed, food prepared, fire tended, tools repaired, layers adjusted. You will move slowly through shadows, aware of time, aware of effort, aware of endurance. The day will unfold without sudden drama, but with quiet persistence, and the household will continue, alive and functioning, sustained by countless small, deliberate actions that repeat endlessly, softly, and necessarily. A medieval household does not exist in isolation. Even if you remain inside timber walls or stone foundations for most of the day, the world outside shapes your every action. Obligations extend beyond your own hearth. They are quiet pressures, measured, repetitive, and unavoidable. You rise early, as always, but today a small journey awaits. Perhaps to the village well, perhaps to the Lord's manor, perhaps to lend hands on communal work. Each step is deliberate. The road is uneven, muddy, and cold. Stones shift beneath your weight. Snow may still linger. You move carefully, carrying tools or baskets, aware that a single misstep could delay the day's work or spill precious contents. The villagers you encounter are familiar, yet your interactions are brief and intentional. Words are few, often functional. The elder asks about grain quality. A neighbor mentions a fence needing repair. You nod, observe, and plan. The day outside mirrors the household's rhythm. Tasks are completed slowly, methodically, with attention to subtle changes. If you carry produce to the market, each movement is measured. A sack of flour rests heavily on your back. A basket of vegetables tilts with every step. You adjust your stance constantly, shifting weight, balancing effort. The pace is slow, controlled, dictated by endurance more than urgency. You notice the cold biting through wool, the wind tugging at your cloak. You notice how footsteps sound on stone or earth, how the sky's light fades gradually. Even social obligations are subject to rhythm. The Lord expects taxes, tithes, or labor on his lands. You arrive when expected, working steadily, quietly, without fanfare. Your body endures long hours of bending, lifting, digging. You are aware of every strain. Fatigue accumulates in the shoulders, the back, the hands. Hunger lingers quietly beneath the day's tasks, as it always does. Conversations, when they occur, are measured. Questions and answers are functional. You observe your neighbor's health, the state of their animals, the quality of their tools. These observations shape your own preparation for days ahead. You notice which crops might fail, which fences require repair, which animals are thriving. Knowledge is shared silently, through demonstration, through brief remarks, through repeated patterns. Community work often involves repetition. Repairing a road, building a fence. Cleaning is shared while all tasks extend slowly over hours. Each motion is deliberate. A hammer strikes, a post is lifted, a stone shifted. Your hands remember the rhythm. Muscles ache gradually. Sweat mixes with cold air. The day moves at a measured pace. Progress is subtle but cumulative. Some obligations recur weekly or seasonally. You prepare for the Lord's visit, gathering the best vegetables or mending garments. You assist in communal harvests or field work. Each action integrates with household survival. Failure to fulfill obligations risks more than reputation. It can limit future resources, disrupt access to aid, or diminish shared security. Even the smallest task requires careful thought. You do not overreach. You do not hurry. Pacing is survival. A misjudged effort could spill water, break a tool, strain a back, or alert animals to missteps. Each step is balanced against others. Energy is finite. You conserve it. You distribute it evenly across the day, across tasks, across seasons. Return journeys are slower. Burdens feel heavier. Fatigue presses against careful attention. You must still navigate uneven paths. You must still avoid spilling or dropping supplies. And yet the mind remains alert. You anticipate the next obligation, plan for tomorrow, and remain aware of the slow accumulating effects of effort. By evening, when you return home, the household awaits. The fire must be tended, animals fed, water replenished, grain inspected, bread or pottage prepared. Tasks do not stop because social obligations intervene. You shift seamlessly from the public rhythm of labor to the private rhythm of survival. You feel a quiet satisfaction, not pride, not relief, but recognition that continuity has been maintained. Evenings are calm, but not idle. Small repairs, tool maintenance, and inspection continue. Every object touched, every meal prepared, every animal attended to reinforces the household's endurance. You notice subtle differences from day to day, the slight sag of a beam, the weight of a pail, the texture of stored flour. Each informs your next action. You understand that obligations beyond the household are intertwined with life inside it. Public labor sustains relationships and access to resources. Private labor sustains life, comfort, and survival. The medieval household exists in this balance, quietly navigating external pressures without drama, without haste, yet with unbroken attention to detail. By nightfall, when the hearth glows softly and animals settle, you pause briefly. Your hands ache. Your back is stiff. Hunger lingers faintly, but you breathe slowly and notice the rhythm, the soft crackle of the fire, the faint rustle of animals, the distant wind against the walls. Continuity is intact. The household endures. Tomorrow, as it has always done, it will begin again. Inside the household, responsibilities are rarely equal. They are assigned, learned, inherited, and observed, quietly enforced by need rather than authority. You know your place, your tasks, and your timing, and so does everyone else. The eldest child may sweep the floor or tend smaller animals. A younger child may carry water or gather kindling. Adults divide labor according to strength, skill, and endurance. Even the order of meals reflects hierarchy. Those who work hardest or earliest often eat first, not as privilege but as practicality. Children, small and hungry, may wait, practicing patience that will serve them later. Cooking is rarely a solitary act. One person stirs the pot, another kneads dough, a third tends the fire. Movements are coordinated quietly. No one hurries. No one shouts instructions. You observe rhythm, adjust, and act with attention to timing. Stir too early, and the flour lumps. Stir too late, and the pottage thickens unevenly. Heat shifts. Flames subside. Coals glow irregularly. Each action influences the next. Cleaning is continuous. Floors swept, ashes removed, utensils washed. You rinse carefully, aware that water is precious. Spilled water cannot always be replaced quickly. Cloths are wrung, dried, and stored for reuse. Dust accumulates slowly. Straw beds require regular maintenance. You roll, shake, fluff, and replace materials to preserve warmth and comfort. Even minor negligence affects daily rhythm. Repairs occupy much of your attention. A loose hinge, a cracked pot, a frayed rope, each is small but consequential. You plan repairs according to urgency and season. Rain may force immediate attention to roof timbers. Cold may prioritize warmth in animal stalls. Tools themselves require care before they can accomplish other repairs. A broken handle may delay firewood preparation. A dull knife may slow food production. Small details ripple outward, quietly shaping the day. Hierarchies also dictate sharing of resources. Meat, if present, is allocated with consideration. Bread is divided evenly to prevent waste or starvation. Herbs and preserved vegetables are apportioned according to role, responsibility, and timing. Children may receive smaller portions not to punish, but because adults need energy for heavier labor. These divisions are unspoken, observed through years of repetition and tacit agreement. Observation is constant. You watch for changes in strength, in fatigue, and illness. A cough may indicate mild fever. Stiff movement may signal overwork. Subtle differences in appetite or posture are noted. Adjustments are made silently. Meals are timed to support those who labor hardest, and tasks are reassigned to prevent collapse of daily rhythm. Even leisure and rest are structured. A brief pause by the fire is not entirely idle. Eyes rove over stored food, checked tools, animals settled nearby. Fingers may smooth a cloth, adjust a lid, or restack a log. Rest is functional, maintaining readiness without haste. You notice fatigue creeping into shoulders, back, and hands, yet movement continues smoothly. Rhythm is preserved. Continuity is preserved. The household hierarchy is reinforced by repetition and observation rather than speech. Everyone learns through watching, practicing, and understanding subtle cues. Tasks are rarely reassigned abruptly. Habits solidify through daily repetition. Each member knows what to expect, how to act, and when to act. Disruptions are rare but managed calmly when they arise. Sometimes larger decisions fall to adults. The household must ration, plan for future scarcity, or address minor injuries in children or animals. These choices are made quietly, based on accumulated observation, experience, and instinct. You weigh effort against available energy, time, and resources. Decisions are deliberate. They shape rhythm without dramatic announcement. Even with hierarchy and division, responsibility is shared. Everyone's actions affect others. A neglected chore may increase work for someone else. A forgotten task may compromise safety or warmth. Coordination is subtle but continuous. You sense it in the way coals are shifted, water poured, dough kneaded, animals guided. Each movement fits into a larger, ongoing pattern that defines the household's daily life. By evening, the household settles into a slower rhythm. Fire burns low. Animals rest. Tools lie ready for tomorrow. Meals have been eaten, cleaned, and stored. Minor repairs are completed. Observations are cataloged mentally for the next day. Fatigue lingers in quiet muscle ache and heavy eyelids, but satisfaction persists in the knowledge that continuity has been maintained. You recognize that endurance is both physical and mental. Fatigue accumulates gradually, unnoticed at first, then registering more strongly in posture, in hands, in back. Repetition, slow labor, and attention to rhythm build resilience. The household survives not through strength alone, but through patient, deliberate attention to every detail. Tomorrow will bring repetition once more. Tools will be checked, food prepared, animals tended, floors swept, fires stoked. Children will carry water, adults will plan, repair, observe. Hierarchy and rhythm will guide each movement. Labor and observation, endurance and care, repetition and adjustment all will continue. The household survives in this quiet orchestration, and you, a participant in the slow, careful balance, will rise, move, observe, and act again, contributing to the persistence of the household one day at a time. The medieval household survives in time as much as in space. Every day, every task, every observation contributes to an invisible ledger, catalogued not on parchment, but in memory and habit. You plan for the future quietly, almost unconsciously, noting what has been consumed, what remains, and what will be needed tomorrow, next week, or next season. You remember the barrels of salted meat from last autumn. You recall which vegetables stored best in the root cellar, which lost shape and flavor faster. You recall the location of every tool, every bundle of straw, every rope coiled in a corner. This memory is not rote repetition. It is alive, dynamic, and functional. You adjust daily based on what you observe. One cracked barrel may change how much pottage you prepare tonight. One dull blade may slow bread preparation. Memory informs movement. Memory informs survival. You also plan according to season. When frost thaws, you note the first shoots of green in the fields. When snow begins to fall, you ensure that sufficient fuel is stacked, that animals are sheltered, that water is protected from freezing. Tasks are not assigned randomly, they are sequenced, layered over days, weeks, and months. Planning is both anticipatory and reactive. You anticipate scarcity, yet respond calmly to sudden shifts in weather, labor, or resources. This careful observation extends to people as well as things. You remember who in the village can assist with particular tasks, who has surplus to share, and who might require aid in return. You recall past harvests, past shortages, past illnesses. Social memory is as crucial as physical memory. You adjust your actions to maintain networks that sustain the household beyond its walls. Even small acts are cataloged mentally. A repaired rope today reduces labor tomorrow. A carefully trimmed wick ensures steady light. A replaced handle prevents a spill. Each minor detail accumulates into a larger structure of continuity. There is no rush. Each act is deliberate, steady, patient. Rhythm, repetition, and endurance become your measures of time and success. Fatigue and hunger are constant companions. They weave through your daily perception of time, shaping pacing and attention. You rise early, work steadily, pause briefly, adjust, and continue. Each day folds into the next, similar in structure, yet subtly distinct. You notice small shifts, a stone in the path that is moved, a log that burns faster, an animal that is quieter than usual. Awareness is continuous, silent, and never fully absent. The household teaches restraint. Resources are finite, energy is finite. You ration not merely for today, but for the accumulation of days to come. Every decision balances present needs against future survival. The pittance you consume now affects endurance in the afternoon. The fire tended now sustains warmth overnight. The careful division of bread preserves strength for labor ahead. Memory and planning are inseparable. The mind tracks cycles, when to sow, when to reap, when to salt meat, when to mend tools, when to inspect animals. Awareness extends across months, through changing seasons, through the slow progression of the year. Each day provides information, each night consolidates it. You carry this knowledge forward quietly, without ceremony, without celebration, but with unbroken diligence. Even error is instructive. A spoiled batch of cabbage teaches care in packing. A cracked pot reminds you to inspect before use. A neglected corner of the floor reminds you that maintenance is constant. Mistakes do not disrupt rhythm, they refine it. Each error becomes data, informing repetition, guiding attention, shaping survival. By evening, the household feels continuous, secure yet quietly fragile. Fire burns low but steadily. Animals are fed, warm and calm. Tools are arranged, sharpened and ready. Food is preserved, prepared and rationed. Water is stored and accessible. Every action, observed and repeated, has contributed to the uninterrupted flow of life. You sit by the hearth briefly, breathing in warmth, observing coals, noting subtle changes. Hands are worn but capable. Eyes are trained to catch minute differences. Mind remains alert but calm. Fatigue lingers, but rhythm and continuity sustain the household more reliably than energy alone. Tomorrow, as always, the sequence resumes. Tasks are repeated, observations are made, adjustments occur, food is prepared, animals are tended, tools are repaired, fires stoked, floors swept. Sleep comes in intervals, punctuated by attention to small but critical details. Memory, rhythm, endurance, and quiet planning ensure that the household persists. This continuity is the essence of medieval survival. Not heroism, not drama, not sudden victories, only patient, measured, deliberate action sustained day by day. The household survives not because of abundance, but because of repetition, observation, memory, and adaptation. The cycle continues indefinitely. You recognize, finally, that survival is less about crisis and more about constancy. Fatigue, hunger, cold, and effort remain, but continuity endures. The household breathes as a single organism, each human, each animal, each tool, each hearth contributing to steady life. The rhythm of days, repeated across weeks and months, forms the backbone of endurance. And in this quiet orchestration, the medieval household exists, persistent, patient, measured, and calm. Every small act, Every observation, every adjustment ensures that life continues. The day ends, but not entirely. The hearth burns low, casting gentle flickers across the walls. Smoke curls lazily toward rafters, and in its slow ascent you notice how it carries warmth, scent, and quiet history together. You sit near the fire, hands rested, body heavy with fatigue but aware. The household survives another day. You survived another day. The world outside has grown dark. Snow may press softly against thatch and timber. Wind may sigh along the edges of walls. But inside, warmth persists. Animals are settled, their steady breathing blending with the faint crackle of coals. Tools lie arranged in readiness. Food is stored carefully, preserved for tomorrow. Continuity has been maintained. It is not perfect, it is not luxurious, but it endures. You reflect quietly on the rhythm of days just past. Harvest and preservation, tending animals, repairing tools, preparing meals, maintaining warmth, balancing obligations within and beyond the household, each task, repeated, refined, and reinforced. Fatigue and hunger linger subtly, but they are companions rather than enemies. They remind you of effort and attention. They mark the slow progress of survival. The passage of time is measured not in hours or minutes, but in the accumulation of tasks, the adjustment of small details, and the persistent attention to needs human, animal, and material. You notice the texture of straw beneath your fingertips, the faint moisture in a barrel, the subtle shift of smoke in the evening air. These are not dramatic signs, they are quiet, essential cues. They guide your actions, your memory, and your endurance. In this reflection, modern comforts seem distant. You do not have constant illumination, soft beds, running water, or warmth at will. You do not have abundance, convenience, or certainty. Instead, you have attention, patience, rhythm, and careful observation. The household survives because someone, perhaps you cares deeply for small, deliberate actions repeated over time. Endurance is not heroic, it is patient. It is quiet, it is repetitive. You have lived through cold mornings, fatigue-laden afternoons, and slow, measured evenings. You have observed subtle changes, repaired small failures, and ensured continuity for animals, tools, and people alike. You have performed actions that appear mundane, yet collectively sustain life. Sleep, when it comes, is intermittent at first. You may rise briefly to adjust a blanket, to shift coals, to check an animal. You may notice the cool seep of night air through cracks in the wall, the faint stirrings of neighbors or animals, the soft ticking of your own heartbeat. Each awakening is quiet, measured, and purposeful. You return to warmth, to rhythm, to continuity. And yet, sleep also arrives gradually, as your body and mind reconcile effort and calm. You drift, noticing only fragments of sensation, the faint heat of the fire, the subtle rustle of straw, the distant whistle of wind. You may remember earlier tasks, slicing cabbage, stacking wood, repairing a handle, measuring flour, feeding animals. Each memory reinforces understanding of endurance. Each recollection is a thread in the fabric of continuity. In the middle of night, the household does not stop. Fires smolder faintly. Animals shift gently. Tools and stored food await new hands in morning light. The structure you have maintained persists quietly, resilient against cold, fatigue, and time. The cycle repeats, uninterrupted. Effort, attention, and patience ensure life continues, day after day, season after season. This quiet continuity is survival's core, not abundance, not sudden success, not external recognition, only persistence, care, and awareness of subtle shifts. You notice the effect of time on walls, tools, stored food, and living creatures. You adjust carefully, subtly, continuously. Survival is rhythm, repetition, and patient observation. Each day feeds the next. Each night holds gentle respite without abrupt relief. Even as the night deepens, the medieval household breathes as one organism. People, animals, tools, fire, food, and shelter coexist in measured balance. You sense the continuity in every sound, every faint movement, every subtle shift of light and warmth. Nothing is idle, nothing is wasted. Everything is accounted for, observed, and maintained. The household exists not through drama or urgency, but through quiet diligence. Morning will come again. You do not rush toward it. You do not anticipate it with excitement. It arrives softly, slowly, in measured increments of light and sound. You rise, you observe, you adjust, and you continue. The household endures. You endure. And in this endurance, life continues, uninterrupted by the passing of hours or the creeping fatigue of effort. Perhaps some days pass unnoticed, blending into one another with subtle variation. Perhaps some tasks feel repetitive, even monotonous. Yet the rhythm is essential. The household depends on it. The animals, the food, the tools, and the people all rely on patient repetition. Continuity is the quiet triumph. Rhythm is the uncelebrated achievement. Persistence is the unseen force. You may fall fully asleep now. The hearth glows faintly. Coals drift slowly toward darkness. Animals breathe gently. Tools rest, ready for tomorrow. Food is stored, safe and enduring. Outside, wind or snow may move unseen. But inside, warmth, attention, and memory sustain life. All is quiet. All is steady. And in this stillness, the medieval household teaches endurance. It teaches patience. It teaches the subtle importance of repetition, observation, and calm care. It teaches that survival is quiet, slow, and measured. Not heroic, not dramatic, not sudden but enduring, persistent and continuous. Tonight you rest in this continuity. You release tension slowly, aware of warmth, aware of rhythm, aware of safety within walls you have helped maintain. Tomorrow will bring repetition, tasks, observation, and subtle challenges. But now the household breathes steadily. You breathe steadily. And for a while you can simply be in quiet comfort within the rhythm you have helped sustain.